Good evening, everyone, and welcome to NPT's Summer Lecture. I'm Mary Bergman. I'm the Executive Director of the Nantucket Preservation Trust, and I'm so grateful for all of you for joining us for NPT's Summer Lecture. No luncheon, just the lecture this year. We're thrilled to have so many people here with us tonight. More people than we could fit in Sherburne Hall. So we're glad that you're all here joining us from the comfort of your home. And we all learned this past year that home is an oasis. It is our place to hide away from the world. And as many of us turned inward, maybe you began considering the space that you occupied for most of the day. I know I did. I'm sure that many of you out there were looking at your walls, your furnishings, your artwork, and wondering just how you could make the space better and more your own. I hope tonight you'll be inspired by our special guest, award-winning designer Victoria Hagan. Before I introduce you to Victoria, I would like to once again thank the leadership sponsors who made this event free to everyone: Mary Randolph Ballinger and Susie and Richard Grove. Special thanks to NPT's Speakers Committee for your help in planning the event, and to Bonnie Sacerdote. A few housekeeping notes: we'll have our annual meeting next week in person here at Sherburne Hall at 4 p.m. on July 29th. So all current NPT members, we hope you'll join us. And if you're not yet a member, we invite you to become one today. NPT is a nonprofit membership-based historic preservation, advocacy, and education organization. Our annual August Fete, which this year is a hybrid in-person walking tour, online video tour, and our Sense of Place exhibition and auction will be the week of August 9th, with our Fete panel taking place on August 12th and the auction closing on August 16th. So it's a week of walking tours. I hope the weather is good because we'll be giving 3 tours a day. I hope you'll be able to join us for that. It should be a really fun time walking around Gull Island Lane and the Lily Pond and learning a little bit more about that special neighborhood of the island. So I would now like to introduce you to Victoria. Victoria Hagan is the award-winning designer whose iconic sensibility is so uniquely American. Architectural Digest has dubbed her the environmental equivalent of Catherine Hagan. I love that. Who else can you say that about? Since founding her firm over 25 years ago, Victoria has been celebrated for an intelligent integration of architecture and interior design. Based in New York City, the 26-person firm works on a wide range of residences throughout the country. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, Elle Decor, Vogue, and many others. She has been awarded many of the country's top design honors, including Architectural Digest AD 100, inducted into the Interior Designer Hall of Fame. A graduate of Parsons School of Design, she serves on the school's Board of Governors. Each year, she endows a scholarship in its MFA program for interior design with the goal of providing education for students from underserved backgrounds. And she's joining us here from her home on Nantucket as well. So she's got a lot of local connections. Victoria is a writer. She's the author of Interior Portraits and Dream Spaces. Both of those books have gone into multiple printings. And her latest book, Live Now, is due out in September, on September 28th. Live Now celebrates the quiet and extraordinary beauty of the everyday, and you can pre-order Live Now through Mitchell's Book Corner by visiting .ly/L live N now all capitals NPT, and Rita will throw that link in the chat. And if you pre-order that way, then Mitchell's will know that you came from this event. And I think it would be great to show them how many people on Nantucket are really excited about this book and Victoria's work. So please join me in welcoming Victoria Hagan.
Hi. Nice to see everyone. Thank you so much, Mary, and everyone from the Preservation Trust for all the wonderful work you do. And it's just, I'm so thrilled to be here sharing and chatting a little bit about what I believe in so much. I think, as many of you know, Nantucket celebrates the past in a way that most other places don't. And for all of us, that's what makes it so special. For me, a sense of the past informs every design decision I make, from the most traditional spaces to the most contemporary. At its best, modern day living incorporates old and new, looking to the past with a nod to the future, but always firmly planted in the present. So I'd like to show you some projects that I've worked on over the past few years that have a different sense of the past and how I've dealt with different issues around the country. So I think we can go to the first project, Taylor. This is a home, an old barn, very special to me. It's where I grew up in Nantucket. It's high view. My parents fell in love with this barn, and it really wasn't a family house. But with the help of Ray Pohl, who I started working with in my many years ago, he transformed the barn and to create a wonderful family home. It was from Massachusetts from 1850, and it was brought to the island in the 60s. And so while it needed a whole refurbish, there were so many details in the barn that were important. This is actually the cover of my first book, Interior Portraits. And I fell in love with these benches, the old stenciled floor. It wasn't perfect, but I was like, that's just the way I want it. And it was very welcoming to come into. And then throughout the house, many of the old timbers were exposed. And on this elevation, we added a deck off the back with a small addition. So it opens up to this 2-story space. And many of my favorite pastime has always been antiquing, and would love weekends going to Ansonia Auction and all the wonderful shops here in town. So I can attest that most everything here has been purchased locally. And here another detail, the problem is an old barn wasn't set up for a family with 4 girls. So these little rooms were built into the existing structure. So I had one, my sister had one, and there were a couple of others throughout the house, but they weren't so large, but I just loved it. It was perfect. Here in the dining room, the original windows, still with the old latches, they were all made new. Actually, over the years, some of the older windows had been changed. So we restored these to the original with the original timbers. The table and chairs, I remember going with my mom. We found it in Nantucket House Antiques. And it's a casual room, but it has served a perfect place for many celebrations. And the little breakfast room here, that fireplace was the original part of the kitchen. But now the kitchen was part of a little small addition. And this breakfast, and then this morning room, I think, this is a little moment. We snuck in we added the little railing of rope going up the stairs, and again, different old pieces. This is the room that we gathered every morning together growing up. Every seat was full, but it felt like the old house. It was a small addition, but it was all glass. You looked out to the garden, and it was really, with the painted floor, it really had a deep connection to the outside, which was very special. So and this bedroom was part of the addition with the deck up top, but the 4-poster bed, a nod to the past, but somehow I think you can work with period pieces and still feel like there's a freshness to it. And I think everyone has their own balance. And when I'm working, I'm always looking for what's the right balance for my clients. So for my parents, this felt right. And it was a great time to spend so much time with. But once I got married and had babies, the guest cottage became a little small, and we searched for our own home. And here, this is our house by the Sankaty Head Lighthouse, and overlooking the pond and the ocean. And for me, it was very, very important to connect to my surroundings in the neighborhood. I love Nantucket so much, and I wanted the house to fit in. And I always like to tell this story about my home here, is that this house was not what I had planned. But after some conversations with the HDC, they were like, no, we don't like the symmetry. We would like you to do different things. And at first I was like, oh, that's so interesting. But I think working with the HDC, I always think makes for a better house. They always are just tapping you a little bit to just say, would you ever think about doing this? And I always look around my house and say, if it wasn't for them I think originally I had planned for like 6 French doors or something, and they said you can have 2. So we changed a lot to windows, and I really think the cozy feeling I have in my house, if we can go to the living room now, is, I think the windows, we have double fireplaces, but this room here, I always like to point out that when you're designing a home on paper, it can get bigger than you want it to be. And I didn't want to build a big house, but I needed the bedrooms and a few, the standard things. And I realized when I first got the first draft, again, I said to Ray, you have to work with me on this. And Ray Pohl designed this beautiful house and took me through the process. But I realized when I looked at the first set of plans, it was feeling too big. And so I was like, this isn't going to work. So I went down and I got a pair of scissors and I just cut away all the pieces that I didn't need. And then I patched it all back together with Scotch tape, took a picture of it and sent it to Ray. And I said, I think this can work. And he was like, Victoria, it's not bad. Yes. So we don't have a lot of hallways. You walk right into my living room and it feels relaxed. You see the view and we experience the light throughout the day. So if you look to the other view here, the other side of the room, and you can see the stairway going up to the light. The floors are finished in a Danish tradition, which I think would drive some people crazy because you can see it marks, but I really like the softness of it underfoot, and it really adds a soft, casual quality to the house. And here, this is our back door, but I always have this, I never like a back door to feel sad or to feel tight or small. So I always make an effort that it's like a really nice, welcoming hello moment, like, hey, I'm home. And so here I have an old trestle table, and it's a place I like to always have flowers and throw my junk. But it's part of the whole experience of the house. And then moving, where are we going to go next? We're going to the kitchen. And I would say this is my favorite spot in the house that I'm speaking to you from right now. I love this layout. It's very compact and I can look to the view and still at the same time keep an eye on the stove. But again, traditional detailing, I added contemporary lighting. So I like to mix a little bit of the old and new. And here's our dining table right in the kitchen. And it provides for a nice, relaxed feeling. I think we spent so much time here last year during the pandemic, and it was an incredible oasis to be able to spend that amount of time here. And this is our family room. A lot of different textures, old textiles. The curtains are an old batik pattern that I found, and the carpet I designed for this room, it's hand woven, and the little wing chair is part of my collection. I like to do some re-editions because I think the nod to the past can still feel comfortable in today's rooms. And this is where we all gather. This is our bedroom. I think when designing the house, as many of you know, in Nantucket, with the height restrictions and things, I wanted a 10-foot ceiling downstairs, and I knew there would be a compromise. So you had to kind of have a little quirkier spaces. So this is we're up in the eaves, but it all works well for me. I don't mind the quirkiness of it all. This is our bedroom, and this is my son's room. So we all upstairs, all the ceilings are tall, so you can really experience the volume of space and really experience the views that go around, the open views. And this study spent a lot of time working at last year, and still enjoy spending that time here. And here's our hidden pool. Gwen Thorson, this was his property, and he had this wonderful hedged in pool, and I just loved the secret quality of it and how it didn't really shout in the landscape. It was tucked away, and so we've maintained it, and really do love the secret getaway of it all. So that's a little bit about where I live here in Nantucket. Then on another island, Martha's Vineyard, where I do a bit of work. This was a very old house built in the 1700s. And I had done many projects with my clients, larger homes, and they fell in love with this little old house. And I remember walking in, and they said, we love it just the way it is. And I'm like, I completely understand that. It was cozy. But the only thing we changed was where the front door was. The door was off to the side. So right there where that door is, we added a window. And I worked with Boris Bogdanovich on this renovation, and we added a pair of French doors in the back. But this whole space, everything about it, the ceiling, the moldings, was all original. But we turned it into more of a welcome room, a space that really just, as you come in, you look out to the sound, and it really just has a wonderful historical feeling. There aren't many rooms designed like this today. So it was really fun to kind of capture that kind of fun spirit of the house. And then we really just paid attention to really keeping this old quality, this cozy quality, little game table, hand-blocked fabrics and hand-woven carpets, keeping all the original details. The house was completely refurbished. I mean, everything was rebuilt, but everything was kept to the original character and the old beams. I mean, I can stand in these rooms and touch the ceiling. And this was a fun kitchen. We came in, and the blue and white floor was there, and my client said, what should we do about it? And I'm like, just keep it exactly the way it is. I love it. So, but we did design that island in the middle to add a little bit more function, and we paid close attention to adding appliances that really didn't take away. But the interesting thing here is we added the beams here, and we added the lights, because over time there was a flat ceiling with some recessed lighting, and we didn't feel that kind of kept with the character of this sweet little old house. And so it was so there are a bunch of little bedrooms that have old pieces of furniture, but the house lives, it's layered. Again, so many of these pieces were found on Martha's Vineyard, going around and collecting pieces. So it's a really fun summer house. Very different than mine, but it has this is a very authentic old house with wonderful details, and we tried to enhance that by painting it all this wonderful gray blue. And then this was an old porch that we added the glass panels in, so it could be a little bit more of a year-round space, but it's a great dining porch, and great for big lunches, especially I think summer is such a wonderful time. Families tend to gather. I think none of us expected to gather as much as we all did last year, but it is something nice when you have space to make it all work. And this little room was like a throwaway room. It was filled with boxes, old storage. And we climb up this old stair, and I'm like, this is amazing. I love this. This is where I want to stay. So we made a little bedroom here. But again, I don't think it would be so charming as if we completely, because on paper, this room is less than ideal. It has low ceilings, it's very tiny, but it makes for a really welcoming, fun little getaway spot. So let's go to the next. I just thought I'd bring you a little bit around the country. This is in Washington, D.C. Wonderful old home built in the 1920s. But this project I thought I'd show you is, I worked on this project with Ferguson Chamamian. If we go inside, this house, we renovated to bring back the old elegance. So everything you see, all the detailing, it wasn't original. So this was all brought back to kind of bring this old house back to life on Embassy Row. And so here in the entryway, all that paneling is all new. And then looking in, we painted these rooms in great historical colors. This fun blue we did in a shiny lacquer paint, looking through to the happy yellow living room, old carpets, traditional pieces, but laid out in a more contemporary way. That seating arrangement works great when you're having your friends over, a bunch of people sitting by the fire and chatting. It keeps the room living very much in the present. And just showing a few more, another detail, a couple of seating areas, looking through to a small study, and a little jewel box of a powder room. I always say you can judge your home on your powder room. I always think they're fun to do. And this has that hand-painted wallpaper from Gracie. And a little study. I think people ask me, what was the big change from the past year? And I'm like, all I heard all year was, we need another desk. Can we get another desk? I need a place for a desk. So having these little areas for desks have been really used quite well. And here in the kitchen, brand new kitchen, it's painted this funny green. And, people always ask, how did you pick the green? Why green? It's an historic color, and I think it just added a touch of whimsy and character to this new kitchen, and it helps it make it feel much older, like it was part of the house from the original time. All right. Okay, this house is very personal to me, very close to my heart. It's my first house. And my husband and I built this house, and we fell in love with wainscot in the Hamptons. And what I loved about the area was its old soul, its ruralness, its quietness. And building a house was very daunting. And I was like, I want to make sure that this feels like an old house. So we took great care of building an old salt box, but we wanted to live in this house with our young children in a different way. So when you come in, the house, you can see that, let's go through in the house. We flip through, you can see we did the lighter wash floors, white paneling, still with antiques. But I think if you flip through these photos, you can see it was a house for a young family. And we lived here looking out to this field. We called it our field of dreams. But we love the old timbers. And historically, this room would have been broken up in several rooms, but this was our big kitchen area, dining, family. We lived here looking out to the field. And in the bedroom, again, lifting up in the tall ceiling and allowing the light to come in. Everyone said, don't you need a shade up there? I'm like, no, not with small kids. You're up every morning. It does not matter. And I actually always love that light coming in. So coming up to this house here in Nantucket, it was a new house with Ferguson and Shamamian. And again, it's sitting on a beautiful spot overlooking the bay and the sound. And so let's pop in this house again, traditional in nature, but again, I think you can live in a new house with an old traditional quality. All these pieces are older, but the house has a more fresh feeling. And if we move through, these are pieces that we collected. This is the area of the living room where there's a TV. And it's a fact of life. I deal with lots of TVs. I used to hate dealing with TVs, and now I say, bring them on. I know how to handle them. So it makes a house kind of live well if you can integrate that technology. Dining room, different pieces collected over time, and a little billiard room. We used charts of the Nantucket waterway around and pieced them together, which is a fun detail. And this classic kitchen. And I think kitchens we've seen evolve so much that they're open, that historically they were closed off. But I think it's time is so precious to us all. So if you can catch that family time quickly as you're cooking, it really, it just adds to your quality of life. So and again, living up in the eaves, collecting folk art. We can move through some of these, some details of the paneling. So, and here's a new bathroom, but really working in the architecture of this traditional form, but creating a special space that feels kind of very luxurious and very contemporary in its layout. So in closing, this is a project from my new book. It's a Normandy style house from Greenwich, Connecticut. And my client, who I'd worked with so many times, said to me, Victoria, the house isn't feeling right. It's just, I love the house, but it just is not right for us. And I understood that, when you put on something and it doesn't feel right, it doesn't fit, it doesn't make you feel good. So it's so nice. What I always like to do is that my interiors feel right for my clients. So I think if you come in, we'll go in here, we removed the wallpaper, we opened up the stair, we celebrated the architecture, and then we opened up the house to the back, if we can. So in this traditional room, we created these canvases looking out to the sound and the beautiful landscape. And then in here, bringing the garden, which was designed by James Doyle, bringing this beautiful garden design and entertaining areas, which now blends so nicely with the interior of the house. And here, living room, which was designed as a garden room, great collection of contemporary art, displayed in a more traditional framework. And then this little cozy library, which we lacquered. This was all original. It has a fresher feeling, and but still very feeling like, and here in the kitchen, this was redone. Again, a splash of color, some contemporary lighting, and we want to move here. And then here in the family room, I think I like this photo because you can see the juxtaposition of the old and the new. And I think it can work together in a way and feel like the here and now. And so this little house that felt really dark and closed in and not young, we I think, celebrated the architecture. And in this master bedroom in the next shot was a tiny little room, no view. And we opened up the view to the sound. And again, we lifted it up into this great roof line of this old house. And it really created this very exciting, very beautiful space. But I close this talk with this image that is the cover of my new book, which really, I think, captures so much of what I believe is important in design, is that we need to respect and enjoy all the inspiration from the past, but really tap into how we're living and where we want to go, and really work together in a way that is respectful to the architecture, to nature, and to really one's own life and how they want to live. But I think we have all come to Nantucket because we love it. And we love what it is, what it was, and what it will remain for generations to come. It is its own vocabulary. An adjective was well as a noun. Nantucket style is like no other. And while it continually evolves, preservation is central to its core. And I so appreciate all the work that this organization does. So thank you for having me. And I've so enjoyed chatting and showing you my work.
Thank you so much, Victoria. That was really exciting. Let me just get my view so I can see you there. It was wonderful to go through those homes, and I wrote down life under the eaves. I was thinking you have designed so many of these spaces that follow the roof lines of these historic buildings. Allow people to, I love that. I also thought it was very interesting just the way that paint and textiles can change a space without having to do much. You don't have to get rid of those lacquered coffered ceilings, and it is just kind of incredible how much that can change a space. If anybody has any questions, please put them into the chat or the Q&A. I've got a lot for us to get started off. One of the things that I'm interested in knowing is, you talked a little bit about this with the pandemic and desks and things, but how do you think, or do you think that people will design new spaces now, having spent so much time in their homes? What is this past year? What effect do you think, if any, this past year might have on designing going forward?
I think we've all tapped back into home. I think home was almost a pass-through. It was an idea. It was something you dreamt about. I think home now is, I think when people think of home, they realize that it's the place they live in. It's the place that makes them feel good. It's the place that they have these family experiences. And I think with all the tragedy around and all the hardship, those happy moments in home are to be celebrated. And I think sometimes that time is overlooked. And I think moving forward, I notice my clients are asking for really cozy spaces that they can gather with their family. I think there's going to be a great, there's celebration in design. And I think in that happiness, we can't forget where we came from and the experiences we've had. So I think all that knowledge just helps our design move forward in a more thoughtful way.
Yeah, absolutely. Paula has a question. She says, I loved your comment about not liking TVs, but realizing that they add to life. How do you integrate TVs into your rooms?
You know what, I used to just cringe. I think people could see me visually cringe when people brought up TVs. And now I like to trick people. I like to say, do you want a TV? How big? And I like to go there because now with technology, there's so many things that you can do. Sometimes people like them exposed. I personally like them a little more hidden. But I think the first thing to figure out is where you like to watch TV. Where are you comfortable watching TV? And then get that to work. Because I always say, you got to go through your day. Where do you have your cup of coffee? Where do you make your calls? Where do you work? Where, how do you like to cook? Go through that. And that when you just go through that process, there are the clues to tell you how to lay it out. So I usually like to say, put the TV across from the sofa and then make it look good. So I go from there.
Excellent. I had a question about those beams in the Martha's Vineyard house. Where did they come from?
So many of them were original to the house. Some of them, the old beams we had to buy for that kitchen. But it was interesting. They came in, and I think that someone was very well intentioned and started to restore them. And I walked in and I was like, stop, please. We might, no, they're great just the way they are. We like the distressing and everything. So I like that character. That's patina. And I think you can never have too much patina.
That brings us to our next question. Sarah was interested in the Swedish wood floors that show distress. They're could you talk a little more about those?
I will. I've always loved it. And they feel particularly soft to your foot, but I warn you, if you drip anything on them, you will see that. It goes away, but it can be a little unnerving at first, but you clean them with soap and water. So it has a very natural feeling, and I think it gives us an old quality.
Do sandy feet kind of wear them down?
No, the sand
wow.
just blends in beautifully. You don't see it. You don't see it.
Great. That's great. Michelle, who's an architect, has a question here. I share the same love of historic Nantucket. How can we get our clients to understand the original historic fabric and not have them want to gut the complete interior? How can you when you're working with people, how do you get them to appreciate those details, those eccentricities in a house?
I always think that I always start, in the beginning of a project, you always have, two sides of a coin, always. And I always think the goal is to have a happy compromise. And that means both people have to give a little. And I think, like with the HDC, you need to listen. I think listening, so I would say, make your case. Tell them why you think it's so special. But also then listen to what it is about the house that they don't like. Because my bet is you can solve the thing that they don't like by giving them something else while letting them still appreciate the fabric of the house. I'm all for renovation. I'm all for addition. I'm all for making, we don't live like we lived 100 years ago. So I think we have to accept that, but I do think there's a balance. And I think in everything, I'm always trying to find that delicate balance of where it just feels right. And I think what I love about Nantucket is I think most people who come here and live here understand the fabric of Nantucket. Because if you don't, if you want to build a glass box house here, you probably should do it someplace else. Not that I love modern architecture. I think it's beautiful, but it doesn't seem like it fits in. And so I think there is a respect of the character of Nantucket and the people who built Nantucket and live here and really share this beautiful island with all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you could have I think of just the balancing and the work that you do and the listening to people. It's like you're a therapist for the house too. You're really finding out what it is that people need and getting.
Well, some people have called me a house whisperer. I do like to feel the space. I do think there's something. I always say to my clients, if they catch me working, I'm sitting, I'm walking, I'm sitting, and I'm like, I'm working. I'm really working. I'm taking it all in. It's really understanding a house and the quality of where it's sited. You know, each place, I think I chose these different projects today because they represented different places in the country that have different feelings and have different characters. And so I think there are just general threads that relate to all different projects, whether it's a little more contemporary or more traditional, small, big. I think there are similar threads that are pulled through. And I think appreciation, respect, and understanding are all very important qualities when it comes to design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I have wondered, you know, you spoke about, I've heard realtors and people who sell real estate and talk about walking into a home, or people who buy homes, walking in and really knowing, okay, this is the house, this is the place. When you're working on a room, how do you know when you're done?
It's interesting. I do everyone works a little differently, but I have an installation. I always say I need my time for my installation, because interior design is not like a computer program. You don't push a few buttons and it arrives and it's done. So I install everything, but then there's this whole layering process of, again, where you're trying to get that quiet balance of it feeling comfortable, cozy, all the different feelings that you've heard your clients ask for, say that are important to them. And you know, maybe I need another light over here if I'm going to read in the evening, or I don't have a glass for a table for my glass here if I'm having my friends over for a cocktail. So you kind of flush it out. And I finish a lot of these, and it's funny, I know when they're done. And but I don't give up until they're done, because it's that feeling of just, you're looking for something, because I don't think people want to deal with interior design all the time. They want to get on with the living, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
So it's not about, I hate the decorating is so, I always say my work is not about the decorating, it's about the living. So I like to do my job and then quietly step away and let people live their lives in my work and have it become their home.
Absolutely. Melody asks if you have a favorite white paint color.
I have a couple, but I will share. My house here in Nantucket is simply white. I like it because it's bright, but not too cold. There's a little pigment in it. And then another color white that I like a lot is, it's warmer, if you're looking for a little creamier, is Mountain Peak white. So those are two that I really like a lot. But I always go to the historic section in the paint colors. So I just always like those colors. But those are a couple of my favorite whites.
I love that almost minty kitchen, and the idea of using paint to make something else newer look older and to fit in with the rest of the house.
I've got a whole bag of tricks.
Yeah, well, of course. There's a question here, which I think, let's see. We've got what? Sorry, I'm synthesizing two questions at the same time. What percentage of the furniture that you use are antiques? And then are there a couple different pieces that you think represent a true Nantucket style if you were trying to create a Nantucket home? Maybe your top, let's say, 3 classic Nantucket pieces.
I always love a great dining table, beautiful wood. I think that's a really important piece. I think a really comfortable sofa is very important. And then I love a beautiful old wing chair or Windsor back chair, or a piece that has some character, or because I see furniture a lot of times like sculpture. It's not necessarily, you know, I'll say, you know, sometimes people say, well, it's very uncomfortable. I'm like, well, there are all these other chairs to sit in. That one's really just nice to sit. It's over to the side. It just adds a little character. So I always like my interiors I always say I like my furniture to speak to each other, like that there's a conversation going on, like a fun cocktail party, lots of people you want to see and talk to. I like there to be a little tension and energy in the furnishings.
I think that really comes across even just looking at these still photographs that we saw. You know, I just start thinking about, I can see stories in my mind of what's happening in that room and who just left or who's about to come in. You know, they're very alive spaces. And let's see, this is also sort of two people asking essentially the same question, which is, how do you work with your clients to determine the direction of the interiors, especially if their taste is different than yours?
I think in the beginning, it's all, you know, you have these conversations, you start with the site, understand where it is, what's important, you listen, you look at the architecture, are you building new? I do a lot of listening. I think it is a very undervalued skill. And I always say to the young designers in my office, you have a lot of skills you don't realize you have. And they're very simple, like understanding, listening, following up, you know, connecting one to the other. It's one thing to hear it. It's the other thing to execute it, to listen, process, and execute it and come through to the end, because design is a process. It's not the easiest process. If anyone does this for a living or has gone through, it's a little challenging. There are lots of hiccups in the road. But I think it's funny, I really, in the beginning of a project, I sit back a bit. I watch what people like. I gather lots of different colors, fabrics, textile, carpets, and images, and I like to see what they gravitate to. And I have this 3-second rule. If I ask a question, you know, how do you feel about this fabric? And if it's more than 3 seconds, I'm like, it's off the table. Like, that just doesn't fit. Because what people don't realize I'm looking for is that immediate, like, love that. Oh, this is great. And so I'm gathering. I am just gathering. And then when I feel I have enough to like dive in, I say, okay, what do you think? You've liked all these things. What do you think if we do this with that? And then you have a whole other layer of conversation. So the work is personal. And I think what's challenging is, I think for designers, is scale, understanding scale of home, scale of furniture, how to deal with that, because I think that can be challenging. And I found through this past year of doing all these Zoom calls, I took for granted the design process. And I realized that I had to tap in more to explain why I was recommending something. And I'm actually now, even though we're not, you know, we don't have to do everything on Zoom, I do find that explaining the process more helps bring clients along. So that's what I would say. It kind of, when you explain the process, why it's important to pay attention to the seat height of a sofa, you know, it's just not what it looks like. So I try and go into the details.
Is not as strong. I think she's back. Okay, you froze for about seconds.
I don't know why, but okay.
Yeah, I think we're just about ready to wrap it up, but I would like to know where every person, I see that we've got people from Hawaii here. If you're from someplace that isn't Nantucket, please type it in the chat. I think we'd love to know where everybody is visiting from. And we'll end with just this: Phoenix, Pennsylvania. Wow, one last, that is the great thing about being on Zoom. Denver, wow, exciting. Darien, Connecticut, Michigan.
So nice.
Wow, that's cool.
Really
New
great.
York. Brooke says, I used to work for Victoria and she is the best. From Argentina, living in Northern California, Texas, New York. Wow. So all over the place, people are inspired by your design. And an interesting question here. Oh, Medina from Italy.
Oh.
Furthest away. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but she also asks, I like antique furniture and design objects, but I am afraid to bring any to a new house and project. As she's bringing a piece that has the history of someone else to a new project. Have you ever come across this in your work? Kind of that combining the old and the new, and do you ever bring a piece and think, oh, this really isn't going to work here?
Definitely. I think it's, again, it's just getting something to feel right. And I think they're different pieces. I completely understand that sentiment. I think it's an attitude. And again, it's a balance. I think sometimes you bring in 4 old pieces and that's just right. Sometimes you bring in that 5th piece, you're like, no, this like just is too, it's just taking away. And again, I always hesitate to like give solid rules because I know that there's so many variables. And in my work, I'm always just really trying to tap into my clients, what they're looking and how they want it to feel. So I think I would, to the woman in Italy, I would say I would be open to bringing in that old piece, but I would do it carefully, thoughtfully, not just because it's old, right?
I like that. And I just want to end with, I was really inspired by the idea when you were talking about, you showed that picture of the sort of yellow orange sofas that were near one another, and the idea that the room into the present is the people and the way that the furniture and the way that a space is used. I think that's something we can all do. And this has just been really great. And I'm so appreciative of your time. And I hope that everybody will pop over to Mitchell's to pre-order Victoria's book, which will be out this fall.
So nice of you.
Well, I am also the chair of the book festival, so I understand how important it is to get those pre-orders out there and to really show that support. And thank you, everybody. I've already pre-ordered it, Megan says. Great. Well, thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We hope to see some of you next week at our annual meeting. And thanks again to Victoria. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their night.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.